All right, hi you guys. We're doing 9.2 today, looking at histograms and some just general shapes of our histograms and normal distributions, things like that. We're going to do a ton on the graphing calculator today, so you definitely need yours, or you need to get the extension for your Chromebook, and you can follow along with mine on the side of the screen here. So in these notes, that first page of the notes might be a little overwhelming. We're not going to read through all of those together. They're just all of the all of the calculator buttons that you guys will use today. Everything's kind of written out so you have one place that you can go and look back without having to like rewatch this whole video or anything like that. Okay, so it's just like a reference sheet basically. The one thing I do want to point out first is this top box. If you've been having trouble with the calculator this unit, last unit, or really any time, and you're getting error messages that you don't know how to fix, this is a strategy you can use that pretty much fixes anything aside from you just like clicking the wrong buttons. But if you have weird things going on in your calculator, if you reset it following these instructions, it pretty much fixes any issue you might be having. Okay, so we will do that today to practice, but we'll get to that in a minute. Today we're going to use our calculator to make some histograms. So again, these are all the directions we'll walk through here in a second. So I'm not going to read through all of those. Let's just go to our first example. So here it says, I gathered data on the temperature in Chicago during 10 days in February. So here's my data set. And using this data, I want to create a histogram. So I'm going to be referring back to the steps on the first page as we go through. Okay, so I need to put all of this data into my calculator. Before I do any of that, I do want to show you guys that resetting feature. Just again, if you're having issues with the calculator, try to reset it. We'll do that to start here just to kind of clear everything out. So if I want to reset my calculator, I'm going to click second and then memory, but it's really the plus button. And then the next button I'll press is 7, and then 1, and then 2. So I click second, memory, 7, 1, 2, cleared. So now I can click clear to get rid of that. Now when I go to type in like data or anything like that, I shouldn't have weird issues. If you've lost a list or something, that should be fixed for you. So again, I want to type in this data set. So to do that, we've done that a few times. I'm going to click stat, and then I want to edit. So I'll click enter, and I want to type in this data into L1. So you shouldn't have anything here now that we've reset the calculator. So I'll type in the data. So 31, 31, 61, 37, 39, 46, 45, 69, 41, and 53. Okay, so now I have all my data into L1. Now the next step would be to turn on our stat plot. So we have not done this yet. So we're not going to be calculating for this one. We're going to actually look at a graph. So see in blue it says stat plot. So I want to get to that by clicking second, y equals. So now here it says all my stat plots are off. I want to turn this first one on. So I'm going to click enter. And then I'm going to turn that one on. See how it's blinking? So I'll click enter. So now it's on. And I want to tell it that I'm making a histogram. So we have all these different types of graphs my calculator can make. The histogram is the one that looks like a bar graph, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So I'll scroll down, highlight the histogram, and click enter. So now histogram is highlighted. It should say L1 and frequency 1 here. If you have a fancy calculator, it might have color, but that's all the only two things we need to really change here. Now I'm on step 4. I'm going to view my histogram. So to do that, I'm going to click the zoom button. And then I want zoom stat, right? This is statistics. So I'm just going to type number 9 so I don't have to scroll. So zoom 9. So I can see my histogram, but I probably want some numbers here. So to see the numbers that represent this, I'm going to click trace. Just regular trace. And now my numbers pop up. So our histogram, in general, it's giving you different ranges that each data point falls in. Okay, so our first range is from 31 to 40.5. like a temperature range, because this is about temperature. The N is how many pieces of data fell within that interval or that range. So 4 pieces of data from our list are between 31, including 31, and 40.5. Okay, so I'm going to start to draw my histogram on my notes. So notice my calculator, it starts all the way at the left, but I want to show that there's a big jump from 0 to 31. So to do that on here, I'm going to actually draw one of these little squigglies. That means that there's a jump here. And then my first dash is at 31. And then this first bar ends at 40.5. I'm going to do all my tick marks and then I'll go back to drawing the actual bars. Okay. So to get to the next bar on my calculator, I'm going to click to the right. So now it jumped over. So then my next dash is at 50. And then I'll go back to my calculator and click to the right again. Let me fix that. Okay, so click to the right. Next one ends at 59.5. Click to the right again on my calculator. Then at 69. And then the last one ends at 78.5. Okay, so now I have all my bars kind of spaced out here. The next thing I want to do is go back to the beginning bar, the first one, and I'm going to use that N value. That's the frequency. So again, that's how many pieces of data fell in this interval. So it looks like this is obviously the tallest bar. And I have 4 pieces there. So on the y-axis here, I'm going to label up to 4. Okay, and then I'm going to try to draw in my bars as best I can to match those labels. So I will have a gap at the beginning, but the rest of the bars should be connected. So my first one goes all the way up to 4. Oh, right about there. The next bar, if I go back, goes up to 3. Not perfect. Whoa. Let me try that again. Okay. And then my next one looks like all 3 of these go up to 1. So I'm just going to draw a horizontal line over to the last bar and then split them up. Again, it's not perfect. I know we're not doing this on pencil and paper, but do your best with it. Okay, so that's my rough histogram. Now, every time you make any graph here, you need a label. So I have my major label of the whole thing, Chicago temperature, but I left boxes for us to label in the X and the Y axis. So I'm going to use my text feature down here. These numbers on my X axis, those are all representations of temperature. And then on the side here, now don't think I can turn it sideways, so I'm just going to fill it in. This is frequency. So for a histogram, the vertical, the y-axis will always be frequency. It's how many times something lives in that interval. Okay. All right. So let's take a closer look at the difference between our histograms and bar graphs, because a lot of kids mix those up. So in this class, we focus mostly on histograms, but you've seen bar graphs before and you'll see them again, so we want to know the difference. So on the left, we have a bar graph. For a bar graph, the data is categorical. Now that means that it's not a number answer, so like shirt color, color of hair, looks like this is about classes, so different things like that. The bars on a bar graph are not touching. See, there's gaps in between them. The x-axis represents our categories, so like type of car you drive, favorite shoe brand, things like that. The y-axis is still our frequency. So that's actually the only thing they have in common. The vertical axis is counting how many are in that category. On the other hand, a histogram, the data is what we call quantitative. That means that it's about numbers. It's a numerical data. So like we did temperature, hours of sleep, things like that. Histogram, the bars are always touching. The x-axis is our number intervals. They can also be called the class or classes, right? Split into classes. That's like our different groups. And then the y-axis is still our frequency. So again, that's the only thing they have in common. Our last piece of this lesson is to look at some different common shapes. So I'm going to challenge you guys to try this on your own first. So let me explain here. These are a bunch of different graphs. They're just sketches to look at some shapes of possible histograms, often called frequency distributions. They're kind of like best fit curves for histograms, so just a sketch kind of following the general shape of a histogram. Okay, so these are some common ones. So you have a word bank at the bottom here. I want you to use the word bank and look at the title, like look at the word and see if you can match it up with the appropriate graph. So pause the video, give it a try, but you do need to check your answers here because there's a common mistake. So pause the video, label each graph using the word bank, just give it your best shot. All right, so here are my answers. I just want to highlight a couple of them. A lot of them are really intuitive, right? They make sense. Reverse J and J shape. They look like what they're called, triangular shape. The bell curve a lot of us has seen before. And uniform might have been a little harder, but see, it makes that nice kind of rectangular shape at all. You get the same, you would have the same frequency in each bar of your graph. The ones that I do want to mention to you guys though are so bimodal. Now that's a word you might not have heard before. We know that that prefix bi means two. That means there's two peaks in the graph. That's why this one's bimodal. So we have two peaks here. And then that helps us understand multimodal. That means that there's many peaks. So we have many peaks for a multimodal. The common mistake though is our skewness. So this first graph here is actually right skewed, and you probably, or you might have thought left skewed because that's where the peak is. But when I see the word skew, that is referring to the tail of the graph. So if you see the word skew, it's referring to the tail. Now the tail is the little end of the graph. So the tail, the end that's kind of sticking out by itself, that's on the right side of this one and the left side of the very last graph. Okay, so that's how you decide whether it's left or right skewed. You look at the tail. All right.